The discovery happened on a Tuesday, though Dr. Park Min-ho would later joke that the end of one era and the beginning of another should have picked a more dramatic day. He sat in his small office aboard Unity 7, the massive orbital station that served as humanity's gateway to the Galactic Council. Surrounded by holographic displays showing alien texts that most humans couldn't even pronounce, Min-ho was a xenolinguist, one of Earth's best. For 3 years, he had been translating ancient council documents, a task the elder species considered beneath them, but necessary for maintaining their vast archives. It was boring work, mostly trade agreements and resource allocation charts from centuries past. But Min-ho had a curious mind, and he noticed something strange in the file structure. There were gaps, spaces where documents should be but weren't. Empty references to records that had been deleted or hidden. He shouldn't have looked deeper. His job was to translate what they gave him, not to go searching for what they didn't. But Min-ho had never been good at following rules when his curiosity was triggered. He wrote a program, something simple by human standards, but apparently beyond what the council expected. The program looked for patterns in the gaps, tried to reconstruct what had been removed based on context clues and metadata. What it found made his blood run cold. The encryption was old, built by species that thought in different patterns than humans did. But human AI had evolved in Earth's competitive environment, learning to think sideways, to find solutions that weren't obvious. Min-ho's program cracked the first layer in 6 hours. The second layer took 3 days. By the end of the week, he was reading files that had been hidden for 200 years. The Galactic Council had been lying about everything. Min-ho read through the night, his hands shaking as document after document revealed the truth. The quarantine zones that humanity was forbidden to enter weren't dangerous at all. They were rich in exotic matter, the rare element needed for advanced faster-than-light drives. The Council had marked them off limits to keep them for themselves, to maintain their monopoly on the best technology. The safety protocols that restricted human technological development had nothing to do with safety. They were designed to keep humanity weak, to make sure Earth never developed weapons or ships that could challenge Council authority. Every time human scientists proposed a new design, every time Earth's engineers wanted to experiment with advanced systems, the Council said no. For your own protection, they said. To prevent accidents. They claimed it was all lies, but the worst revelation came in a file marked Species Management Protocol, Humans. Min-ho had to read it 3 times before he could accept what he was seeing. The Council hadn't invited humanity to join them out of kindness or respect. They had been studying Earth for decades before first contact, and they had discovered something valuable. Human brains work differently than other species. Where most aliens thought in logical, linear patterns, humans were chaotic, intuitive, able to make creative leaps that seemed impossible to other species. The Council wanted that. They needed it. So they set up cultural exchange programs where young humans went to study at Council universities, where human artists and scientists worked alongside aliens on joint projects. The humans thought they were learning, growing, being welcomed into galactic civilization. But the Council was harvesting them, studying how they thought, recording their problem-solving methods, stealing the one thing that made humanity special. And when they had taken enough, when they had learned all they could, the Council planned to get rid of the evidence. Files marked Population Reduction Initiative laid out a plan to crash Earth's economy, to restrict access to food and medicine, to reduce humanity's numbers by more than half over the next 10 years. Not through open warfare, which might unite other species against them, but through slow strangulation. Through policies that looked reasonable on the surface, but were designed to kill. Min-ho sat back in his chair, staring at the evidence floating in the air around him. His first instinct was to run straight to Ambassador Lee Haijin, to throw this in front of the council and demand answers. But 15 years in diplomatic circles had taught him patience. If he revealed what he knew now, the council would deny everything, would bury him in procedure and paperwork while they cleaned up the evidence. He needed allies. He needed people with power who could do something with this information. He thought of Captain Kim Ji-won. They had met 2 years ago at a reception. One of those boring diplomatic events where military officers and researchers were forced to make small talk. Ji-won had been different from other officers Minho had met. She asked real questions. She listened. And she had said something that stuck with him. I don't trust anyone who tells me something is for my own good. Good parents teach their children to think. They don't lock them in a cage and call it protection. Minho encrypted the files using human-only algorithms and sent them to Ji-won with a simple message. We need to talk. In person. Come alone. 3 days later, they met in a maintenance tunnel deep in Unity 7's infrastructure, a place where the station's monitoring systems had blind spots. Minho showed her everything. Ji-won didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. She just watched the documents scroll past, her face getting harder with each revelation. When Minho finished, Ji-won was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, How sure are you about this? 100%, Minho replied. I've triple-checked the translations. I've verified the authenticity markers. This is real. Ji-won nodded slowly. Then we need to bring this to Admiral Choi, and we need to do it without the Council. Knowing Admiral Choi Dae-yeon commanded Earth's United Defense, forces from a station in high orbit above Earth, was a man who had never fully trusted the Council's benevolence, who had spent 15 years preparing for a day he hoped would never come. When Ji-won and Minho arrived at his office with their evidence, he listened without surprise. When they finished, he said, I was wondering when someone would find this. He activated a holodisplay, showing them something neither had seen before. Schematics for warships. Hundreds of them. Hidden construction facilities in the outer solar system. Training programs for crews that had been operating in complete secrecy. I'm not psychic, Choi said, seeing their shocked expressions. But I'm old enough to know that powerful people don't share power willingly. The Council's restrictions never made sense from a safety perspective. They made perfect sense from a control perspective. So I made sure we had options. If this day ever came. He looked at the evidence Minho had gathered and made a decision. We're not going to the Council with this. We're not going to beg them to explain or hope they see reason. We're going to prepare Earth's response. And when we move fast and we move hard. He called in Ambassador Lee Haijin. She arrived an hour later, read through the files in silence, and then said something that surprised them all. Thank God, I've been waiting for proof. She explained that she had suspected something was wrong for months. The way Council members spoke when they thought she wasn't listening. The condescending tones. The casual dismissals of human concerns. She had known something was off, but without evidence, she couldn't act. Now they had evidence. And they had a choice to make. Choi activated something he called Protocol Prometheus. Orders went out to secret facilities across the solar system. Ships that had been waiting in the dark powered up their drives. Crews that had trained for years in silence were told to prepare for deployment. Earth's industrial capacity, which the Council thought they had mapped and understood, revealed itself to be 3 times larger than reported. Humanity had been preparing. And now they were ready, but they needed time. Time to position their forces. Time to gather allies. Time to make sure that when they revealed the truth, they had the strength to back up their words. Ambassador Lee would return to the Council and continue playing her role. She would smile and nod and accept their restrictions while secretly buying time for Earth to mobilize. Captain Jiwan would take command of the first response fleet, positioning her ships to move the moment the order came. And Dr. Mino would continue his work in the archives, gathering every scrap of evidence he could find. As the meeting ended, Admiral Choi looked at each of them and said, "The Council lied to us. They planned to destroy us. They thought we would never find out, and if we did, that we would be too weak to resist. They were wrong on both counts. In 72 hours, we show them exactly how wrong they were." Captain Jiwan stood at attention and saluted. "What are my orders, sir?" Admiral Choi's smile was cold and hard. "Prepare the fleet. We're done playing by their rules." Commander Yoon Seojin had spent 10 years in the dark spaces between planets, training crews who would never see home until their mission was complete. She commanded what Earth's military called the Ghost Fleet, 200 warships built in secret facilities scattered throughout the Kuiper Belt and Oort cloud, so far from the sun that Council sensors never bothered to look. The activation order came through on a quantum-encrypted channel that the Council had assured humanity was impossible to create. Yoon read it twice, then allowed herself a small smile. After a decade of preparation, of drills and simulations and endless waiting, it was finally time. She walked through the command deck of her flagship, the Horizon's Edge, watching her crew respond to the alert with practiced efficiency. These men and women had volunteered for a mission they barely understood, agreeing to spend years away from Earth on the slim chance they might be needed. Now they would prove that sacrifice meant something. "All ships report ready status," her communications officer announced. "The Ghost Fleet is operational." Yoon nodded. 200 ships, each one incorporating technology that blended Council designs with human innovations the elder species had forbidden. Quantum stealth systems that bent light around the ships, making them invisible to conventional sensors. Weapons that combined kinetic mass drivers with plasma containment fields. Point defense systems enhanced by artificial intelligence that learned and adapted in real time. The Council had told humanity these technologies were theoretically impossible or too dangerous to pursue. But humans had a talent for doing the impossible when properly motivated. Fear of extinction was excellent motivation. Back on Unity 7, Ambassador Lee attended another Council session, her face carefully neutral as the Vrelnath representative announced new restrictions on human mining operations in the asteroid belt. The stated reason was environmental protection. The real reason, Lee now understood, was economic strangulation. Cut off humanity's access to raw materials. Make Earth dependent on Council suppliers. Drive up costs until the human economy collapsed. Earth accepts these new guidelines, Lee said with diplomatic grace. We appreciate the Council's concern for proper resource management. The Vrelnath representative, a crystalline being named Velmoth, made a sound that translated as satisfied agreement. He thought he had won another small victory, tightening the noose around humanity's neck one regulation at a time. What Velmoth didn't know was that Lee's acceptance signal contained a hidden code, transmitted through quantum channels to Admiral Choi's command center. The message was simple. Phase 2 activated. On Earth, thousands of kilometers below the orbital stations. Lieutenant Kang Doyan led a team of specialists into a restricted section of the planetary defense network. They were young, most of them in their 20s, part of a generation that had grown up knowing nothing but Council condescension. They had learned alien languages, studied alien cultures, and pretended to be grateful for the opportunity. All while preparing for this moment, Kang's mission was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. He needed to infiltrate the Council's communication networks and insert monitoring systems that would give Earth eyes and ears throughout galactic civilization. The Council's security was good, built by species with millions of years of technological development. But it had a weakness the elder species didn't recognize. It was logical, predictable. designed by minds that evolved in cooperative environments. Humans evolved as competitive hunters on a planet full of predators. Human hackers thought like predators, looking for weaknesses, exploiting trust, using social engineering and psychological manipulation in ways alien species never anticipated. Hong's fingers flew across his interface, running programs that probed council networks like a burglar testing windows and doors. He found his opening in the cultural exchange databases, the systems used to manage the human students and researchers the council was so carefully studying. The council had assumed humans would be grateful for access, would never think to use it as an attack vector. They were wrong. Within 6 hours, Kang's team had listening posts scattered throughout council infrastructure. Data began flowing back to Earth, communications between council members, ship movements, resource allocations, and most importantly, the timeline for their planned actions against humanity. What he found confirmed their worst fears. The council planned to implement full economic restrictions within 6 months. If humanity resisted, military intervention was authorized. The Vrelnith Directorate, which controlled most galactic trade routes, was pushing for immediate action. They saw humanity as a threat to their commercial dominance and wanted Earth dealt with before humans got any stronger. Admiral Choi reviewed the intelligence in his command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the strategic situation across the solar system. Captain Jiwan stood beside him, along with Dr. Han Jisu, the scientist responsible for Project Prometheus. 6 months, Choi said quietly. That's how long we have before they start the economic strangulation. And if we resist, they'll move to military action. Jiwan studied the tactical displays. The Ghost Fleet can secure the quarantine zones, but we can't hold them indefinitely against the Council's full military force. We need to change the equation. Dr. Han smiled, and there was nothing friendly in that expression. I have a way to do that. Operation Checkmate. We don't wait for them to act. We force their hand on our terms. She explained her plan, and even Admiral Choi looked impressed. It was audacious, dangerous, and required perfect timing. But if it worked, it would shatter the Council's power structure before they could mobilize against Earth. The plan had 3 parts. First, release the evidence of Council lies to every species in galactic civilization, not just to leadership, but to ordinary citizens. Show them all how they had been manipulated and controlled. Second, have the Ghost Fleet secure the quarantine zones, claiming them as human territory based on Council Charter violations. Third, reveal humanity's true military capabilities in a demonstration that would make any attack too costly to consider. They'll call it an act of war. Lee warned over the communication link. They were already planning to destroy us, Choi replied. At least this way, we choose the terms of engagement. He looked at his senior staff. We move in 72 hours. Captain Jiwan, position your fleet at the quarantine zone perimeter. Commander Yoon, the Ghost Fleet launches in 60 hours. Dr. Han, prepare your broadcast. Make it something the galaxy won't forget. In the days that followed, humanity moved with purpose that surprised even those who knew the plan. Ships that had been hiding in the outer solar system began their burn toward strategic positions. Communication arrays focused on Council networks. Intelligence teams finalized their target lists. Dr. Mino continued his work in the Council archives, gathering every piece of evidence he could find. He discovered communications proving the Council had suppressed cures for diseases affecting minor species, keeping them weak and dependent. He found records of civilizations that had been destroyed when they developed technologies the Council wanted to monopolize. He uncovered a pattern of lies and manipulation, stretching back thousands of years. All of it went into Dr. Han's broadcast. She worked around the clock, crafting not just a data dump, but a narrative. Humans understood something the Council didn't. Facts alone don't change minds. Stories do. Emotional connections do. She structured the broadcast to resonate with each species' psychology, using the 15 years of cultural exchange to understand exactly what would make them question their leaders. For the Faxis Collective, a hive mind species, she emphasized how the Council's lies created disharmony and false unity. For the Keldari Ascendancy, energy beings who prided themselves on philosophical wisdom, she highlighted their complicity in deception. For the dozens of minor species who had suffered under Council restrictions, she showed them they weren't alone, that their struggles were part of a larger pattern of control. It was psychological warfare on a galactic scale. And humans were very, very good at it. Commander Yoon's Ghost Fleet completed its final preparations. Crews ran through simulations one last time. Engineers checked every system. Everyone knew what was coming. In a few days, they would either change galactic history or die trying. On Unity 7, Ambassador Lai attended one final council session before the storm. She watched Velmoth and the other council leaders discuss their plans, oblivious to the fact that humanity already knew everything. They spoke about humans the way farmers discuss livestock, debating the most efficient methods of culling and control. Lee kept her face neutral, but inside she was counting down the hours. Soon, these arrogant beings would learn that humanity was nobody's livestock. They would learn that the species they had underestimated had teeth and claws and the will to use them. The session ended, and Lee returned to her quarters. She composed one final message to Earth, using the quantum channels the Council didn't know existed. All pieces in position. Ready on your signal. Admiral Choi received the message in his command center. He looked at the displays showing Earth, the whole world that the Council had planned to quietly destroy. He thought about the billions of people who had no idea how close they had come to extinction. He thought about the future humanity was about to fight for. He entered the activation, code for Operation Checkmate. Across the solar system, humanity began to move. The Ghost Fleet powered up its drives, 200 ships emerging from hiding like predators stepping into the light. Captain Ji-Wan's response fleet formed up, weapons armed and shields active. On Earth, transmission arrays locked onto Council communication networks, ready to broadcast the truth across the galaxy. In the darkness between stars, Commander Yoon watched her sensors track the fleet's formation. All systems showed green. All crews reported ready. She opened a channel to every ship in the Ghost Fleet. For 10 years, we've prepared for this moment. We've trained, sacrificed, and waited in the dark so that humanity could survive. The Council thought we would never find out about their plans. They thought if we did, we would be too weak to resist. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we take back our freedom and offer it to every species the Council has oppressed. This is our moment. Make it count. She closed the channel and gave the order that would change everything. All ships, engage FTL drives. Destination, Kronos Quarantine Zone. Time to jump, 60 seconds. 60 seconds to the point of no return. 60 seconds until the galaxy learned that humanity was done asking permission. A countdown reached 0. 200 ships vanished from the solar system in bursts of twisted space-time, leaving nothing behind but the memory of their passage. Admiral Choi watched them go, then turned to his communications officer. Send the signal to Dr. Han. Activate the broadcast. Humanities. Answer to the Galactic Council's lies began, transmitting across every communication channel in known space. The galaxy was about to wake up. The broadcast hit every communication network in Council space simultaneously. On thousands of worlds, billions of beings stopped what they were doing as their displays lit up with Dr. Han's message. It started with a simple statement in every major galactic language. The Galactic Council has been lying to you. What followed was not just a data dump. It was a story, carefully crafted to reach hearts as well as minds. Dr. Han had spent 15 years studying how different species thought, how they processed information, how they made decisions. She used all of that knowledge to create something unprecedented in galactic communication, a message that made beings care for species that valued logic and evidence. She provided thousands of documents with full authentication codes. For those that responded to emotional appeals, she included testimony from victims of council manipulation. For cultures that respected authority, she showed how that authority had been corrupted. For those that valued cooperation, she revealed how trust had been betrayed. The evidence scrolled past, undeniable and damning. The quarantine zones that were actually resource hoards. The technology restrictions designed to maintain control rather than ensure safety. The diseases the Council could have cured, but didn't. The civilizations they destroyed. The plans to reduce Earth's population by more than half. And throughout it all, Dr. Han wove a question that every species had to answer for themselves. If they lied about this, what else had they lied about? If they planned this for humanity, what are they planning for you? On the Faxis homeworld, drones began questioning the hive mind's directives. The Faxis operated on consensus, with individual members surrendering their autonomy to collective decision-making. But the broadcast created dissonance, showing that the consensus they had been following was built on false information fed to them by council leadership. The hive mind fractured. Not completely, but enough. Drones started making independent decisions, refusing orders, demanding truth. Within hours, the Faxis Collective announced it was withdrawing its agricultural support from council operations. Without their resources, feeding the vast bureaucracies that ran galactic civilization became a massive problem. On Keldar, the energy beings who positioned themselves as the galaxy's philosophical guides faced a different crisis. They had spent millennia teaching other species about wisdom, truth, and ethical leadership. The broadcast showed their hypocrisy in brutal detail. They had known about council lies and said nothing. They had profited from the same systems they claimed to oppose. Young Keldari, those who actually believed the philosophy their elders taught, rose in protest. The ascendancy split between reformists who sided with humanity and traditionalists who saw Earth as dangerous upstarts disrupting the natural order. Dozens of minor species, those who had suffered under council restrictions for centuries, saw the pattern. They realized their own struggles with safety protocols and resource management were part of the same system of control. If humanity could break free, so could they. The galaxy erupted into chaos. And in the middle of that chaos, Ambassador Lee walked into what she knew would be her final council session. The chamber was in upheaval. Representatives shouted at each other in multiple languages, their translation systems struggling to keep up. Council Director Velmoth tried to restore order, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation. When he finally achieved silence, Velmoth turned to Lee with unconcealed fury. This is an act of terrorism. You have released classified information, disrupted galactic stability, and violated every agreement Earth signed when joining the Council. Retract these lies immediately and submit to Council inspection, or face the consequences. Lee stood calmly at her podium, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the chamber with perfect clarity. Lies? Everything in that broadcast is verified and authenticated. You're welcome to challenge any of it. But we both know you won't, because you can't. Because it's all true. She activated her own display, showing additional evidence her team had gathered during the chaos. Communications between council leadership discussing the best methods to suppress disease cures. Strategic analyses of which species to keep weak and which to eliminate entirely. Economic models calculating the optimal population levels for maximum control. You call this terrorism? Lee continued. I call it truth. You had plans to kill 4 billion humans. You've been harvesting our creativity like we're some kind of resource. You've lied to every species in this chamber about what you really are. And when caught, you don't apologize. You don't explain. You threaten. Velmoth's form darkened, a sign of anger in Velnoth body language. Earth has 48 hours to surrender your illegal military forces and accept Council authority, or we will consider it an act of war. Lee smiled, and there was no warmth in it. You're welcome to try. But you should know something. We're not alone anymore. On cue, representatives from 12 minor species stood from their seats. They were small delegations, species that barely registered in Council power calculations. But together, they represented key trade routes and resource systems scattered across the galaxy. The Varix delegate, a small insectoid being, spoke in a clicking language that translated as, "We withdraw from Council authority. If Earth is guilty of revealing truth, then we stand guilty with them." One by one, the other delegates made similar declarations. The coalition represented maybe 5% of Council military power, but they controlled systems that Council logistics depended on. It wasn't enough to win a war, but it was enough to make one painful. Velmoth stared at the defectors with something like disbelief. In thousands of years of Council history, this had never happened. Species didn't just leave. They didn't rebel. The system of control was too complete, too carefully maintained, except it wasn't anymore. Humanity had shattered it. While the Council chamber descended into chaos, Commander Yoon's ghost fleet arrived at the edge of the Cronus expanse, the largest of the quarantine zones. Council patrol ships detected them immediately and scrambled to respond, but their sensors showed impossible readings. 200 ships had appeared from nowhere, using stealth technology that shouldn't exist. The patrol commander transmitted a warning. "Unidentified vessels, you are entering restricted space. Power down your weapons and prepare for inspection." Commander Yoon replied on an open channel that every ship in the sector could hear. The Kronos expanse is no longer under Council restriction. These systems are now under human protection, held in trust for all species denied access by Council deception. Any species may petition for resource sharing. The age of artificial scarcity is over. Her fleet moved into defensive formation around the zone's most resource-rich systems. The Council patrols found themselves outnumbered and facing technology they didn't understand. They called for reinforcements and waited for orders. Unsure how to respond to a situation their training never covered, the orders came from Velmoth himself. Hold position, but do not engage without authorization. He knew what Yoon was forcing him to do. Either accept this defiance and lose the Council's monopoly on strategic resources, or attack and risk sparking the galactic civil war that humanity's broadcast had primed the galaxy for. While the Council debated, Captain Jiwan executed the most audacious part of the plan. Her small diplomatic fleet jumped to a system beyond Council space, one the Council had marked as uninhabited in their star charts. It wasn't uninhabited. The Vrenkai lived there, a spacefaring civilization that had achieved faster-than-light travel 300 years ago. They should have been welcomed into galactic civilization. Instead, the Council had quietly contained them, feeding them false information about the universe beyond their borders, keeping them isolated so there would be no witnesses to Council methods. Jiwan's ship broadcast a message in the Vrenkai language, which Dr. Mino had reconstructed from stolen Council files. "We are humans from Earth. We have come to tell you the truth about the galaxy you live in, and to offer you alliance if you want it." The Vrenkai response was cautious at first, then shocked as Jiwan shared the evidence of Council deception. Here was another civilization that the Council had lied to, another species kept ignorant and controlled. The revelation triggered exactly the response humanity hoped for: rage and a desire for justice. Within hours, Renkai ships began moving to join the human fleet. They weren't many, and their technology was less advanced than Council standard, but they were willing. And their existence proved something important. Humanity wasn't crazy or paranoid. The Council really was as bad as the evidence showed. Back on Earth, Admiral Choi watched the tactical situation develop across multiple displays. The Ghost Fleet held the quarantine zones. The coalition of minor species was disrupting Council logistics. The Vrenkai provided moral authority and additional forces. And the broadcast had turned galactic public opinion into a weapon, making any Council military action politically costly. But he knew it wasn't enough. The Council still had overwhelming military superiority if they chose to use it. They were debating now, paralyzed by the unexpected nature of humanity's response. But that paralysis wouldn't last forever. He opened a channel to every human ship, every defense platform, every military installation in the solar system. This is Admiral Choi. In the next few hours, the Council will decide whether to negotiate or fight. We've done everything we can to make them choose negotiation. But we have to be ready if they choose violence. All forces maintain combat readiness. If they come, we make them pay for every meter of space. The response came back from hundreds of ships and stations. Ready, sir? On Unity 7, Ambassador Lee left the Council chamber for the last time. She had accomplished her mission. Buy time and force the Council into a public confrontation where their lies were exposed. Now the military phase would begin, and that was beyond her control dot. She recorded one final message to Earth. I've done all I can here. The Council is fractured, their authority is questioned, and they're afraid. But fear makes them dangerous. They'll strike back, and when they do, it will be with everything they have. Be ready. The message transmitted through quantum channels to Admiral Choi's command center, arriving at the same moment as another piece of intelligence from Lieutenant Kong's network. The Council had made its decision. They were sending the Vrelnath Defense Armada to retake the quarantine zones by force. 500 warships, the largest concentration of military power in known space, crewed by beings with centuries of combat experience. The message included an estimated time of arrival, 18 hours. Admiral Choi looked at the numbers, did the calculations, and knew the truth. The Ghost Fleet was outnumbered more than 2 to 1. If this came down to a straight fight, humanity would lose. But Commander Yoon wasn't planning a straight fight. She had spent 10 years training her crews for exactly this scenario. She sent a message back to Admiral Choi. Just 3 words. Let them come. Across the galaxy, pieces continued to move. The Vrelnath Armada began its burn toward the Kronos expanse. The Ghost Fleet prepared its defenses. Coalition species moved to support positions. And on Earth, billions of people who had been going about their normal lives suddenly understood that they were at war. A war they didn't start. A war they tried to avoid. But a war they were determined to win. The countdown began. 18 hours until the Battle of Kronos Expanse. 18 hours until humanity proved whether they could back up there. Defiance with force. 18 hours until the galaxy learned what happens when you lie to. Humans. The Vrelnath Defense Armada arrived at the Kronos Expanse in perfect formation. 500 warships arranged in attack patterns that had won battles for 1,000 years. Each vessel was crewed by Vrelnuth warriors who had trained for centuries, who had never known defeat, who believed absolutely in their superiority over the primitive humans. Commander Yoon watched them approach on her tactical display. 200 Ghost Fleet ships against 500 Council warships. The numbers looked bad, but numbers didn't tell the whole story. The Vrelnath expected to fight enemies who thought like they did, who used logical tactics and predictable strategies. Humans didn't think like that. The Vrelnath commander sent a final warning. Human vessels, you are in violation of Council law. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Yoon's response was simple. Come and take it. The battle began with the Vrelnith doing exactly what their training taught them. Overwhelming firepower, coordinated volleys, systematic target elimination. Plasma beams and kinetic rounds filled the space between fleets. Human shields flared bright as they absorbed the impacts, and several Ghost Fleet ships took heavy damage in the first minute's dot. It looked like the Vrelnith strategy was working. But that was what Yoon wanted them to think. She gave the order for pattern chaos, a tactical doctrine that could only work with human crews. Instead of logical, efficient maneuvers that alien tacticians would expect, human ships began moving in ways that seemed random. They broke formation, scattered, regrouped in unexpected places. Some ships charged forward while others fell back. Some circled wide while others drove straight into the enemy formation. The Vrelnith computers, designed to predict enemy movements based on optimal tactics, started making errors. Ships weren't where they should be. Attack patterns broke down. The perfect coordination that made the Vrelnith armada so effective began to fall apart. Lieutenant Kong, commanding the destroyer Defiant, saw an opening. A Vrelnith battlecruiser had moved to intercept what its sensors showed as a retreating human vessel, leaving its flank exposed. Kong didn't hesitate. He pushed his engines to maximum, came in under the battlecruiser's shields at an angle their point defense couldn't cover, and fired a full spread of kinetic harpoons directly into the ship's power core. The battlecruiser exploded, taking 2 nearby Vrelnith frigates with it. Dr. Han's cyber warfare team, watching the battle from Earth, activated their weapon. For 15 years, humans had studied Council technology, looking for weaknesses. They found one. Alien AI thought in logical patterns, making them predictable. The virus Han's team had designed exploited that predictability. It didn't shut down Vrelnith systems. That would have been too obvious, too easy to detect and counter. Instead, it introduced tiny errors. Targeting computers aimed just slightly off target. Communications experienced microsecond delays. Sensor readings became fractionally less accurate. Individually, these errors meant nothing. But in a fleet battle where milliseconds mattered, they cascaded. Ships fired at where targets used to be, instead of where they were. Orders arrived too late to be useful. Formations drifted out of optimal positions. The Vrelnith fleet, built on precision and coordination, began to unravel. Commander Yoon's flagship unleashed another surprise. Weapons that combined Council physics with human engineering in ways the elder species never imagined. Kinetic rounds that traveled through micro-wormholes, appearing inside enemy shields. Plasma torpedoes with guidance systems based on predator instincts, hunting their targets like living things. Point defense enhanced by AI that learned and adapted in real time, getting better with every engagement. The battle raged for 6 hours. Space filled with debris from destroyed ships, human and Vrelnith both. But slowly, impossibly, the tide turned. The Ghost Fleet was taking casualties, nearly 40 ships destroyed or disabled, but the Vrelnith armada was taking worse. Their precise tactics, designed for overwhelming force, became a liability when facing an enemy that refused to follow any predictable pattern. A young human captain saw a Vrelnoth dreadnought trying to reorganize part of the fleet. His destroyer was already damaged, shields failing, weapons depleted. Any logical commander would have retreated. Instead, he calculated an intercept course, pushed his failing engines to maximum, and rammed the dreadnought at relativistic speed. The explosion took out the dreadnought and 3 ships around it. The human crew died, but they bought the Ghost Fleet crucial minutes to reposition. That kind of sacrifice repeated across the battlefield. Human crews knew that their families were on Earth, that if the Ghost Fleet fell, there was nothing to stop the Council from destroying their homeworld. They fought with a desperation and determination that the Vrelnith, for all their experience, couldn't match. After 6 hours, the Vrelnith commander made a decision that would have been unthinkable hours before. He ordered a retreat. The Defense Armada, pride of the Council military, withdrew from the battlefield, leaving behind more than 150 destroyed ships. Commander Yoon watched them go, standing on a bridge half destroyed by weapons fire, surrounded by crew members who looked as shocked as she felt. They had won. Humanity had defeated the Council's premier military force. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Then the political shockwaves began. The Thaxis Collective, seeing that humanity could actually win, declared full neutrality. They wouldn't fight for either side, and they were withdrawing all agricultural support from Council operations. Without their resources, the vast Council bureaucracy couldn't function. The Keldari ascendancy split openly. The reformist faction declared support for humanity and the new coalition. The traditionalists still backed the Council, but couldn't act without the reformists' cooperation. Minor species across the galaxy began openly defying Council restrictions. The authority structure built over millennia crumbled as species realized they didn't have to obey. The Council's power had always rested on the belief that resistance was futile. Humanity proved that belief wrong. Ambassador Lee, now working from Earth, coordinated with representatives from dozens of species. Together they drafted the Prometheus Accords, a framework for a new galactic government based on transparency, equal access to resources, and mutual defense rather than hierarchical control. But the Council wasn't finished. Back on their homeworlds, the remaining Council leaders faced a terrible reality. Their military advantage was gone. Their moral authority was shattered. Species were abandoning them daily. They had one option left, one card they could still play. Lieutenant Kong's intelligence network picked up the signal. Deep in Council territory, in a vault that hadn't been opened in thousands of years, something was powering up. Ancient weapons, technology from civilizations the Council had destroyed. Weapons so powerful, they had been sealed away and forgotten. The Council was going to use them. Not to invade Earth, but to destroy it. If they couldn't control humanity, they would make an example of them. Show the galaxy what happened to species that defied Council authority. Admiral Choi received the intelligence on his command center, now rebuilt after being damaged in a Council strike against Earth's orbital infrastructure. The Council would attack within days, possibly hours. The Ghost Fleet was too far away to return in time. Earth's defensive grid, while strong, wasn't built to stop weapons that could crack continents. He called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. Captain Jiwan proposed taking a strike team directly to the Council vault, neutralizing the threat at its source. It was a suicide mission, one ship against the Council's most heavily defended facility. But Dr. Mignot offered a different approach. His research into ancient civilizations revealed something the Council had missed. The ancient weapons weren't just objects. They were semi-sentient, with security protocols based on the psychology of their creators. Species the Council had destroyed because they developed technologies the Council wanted to monopolize. The weapons would only activate for beings whose thought patterns matched their creators. The Council had been studying this for centuries, trying to understand how to control them. They had never managed it completely, which was why the weapons remained mostly sealed. But humans, with their adaptable psychology and talent for empathy, might be able to communicate with these weapons in ways the Council never could. Captain Jiwan's mission changed. Instead of fighting her way through to the vault, she would try to talk to the weapons themselves. Make them understand what the Council really was, what they planned to do with technology meant for exploration and creation. The Indomitable prepared for the most important journey of the war. Jiwan selected her crew carefully, bringing Dr. Minho and Lieutenant Kong, along with the best soldiers and engineers humanity had. They would jump deep into council space, to the Obsidian Citadel where the ancient weapons were kept. Back on Earth, Admiral Choi prepared for the worst. If Jiwan's mission failed, the Council would use those ancient weapons to destroy Earth. He ordered evacuation of major population centers into deep shelters. Preparing for an attack that might come without warning, he transmitted to all human forces. Captain Jiwan is attempting to neutralize the threat before it reaches us. But if she fails, if the Council launches those weapons, we need to be ready to respond. Not just to defend, but to make sure they understand that destroying Earth means destroying them too. We will not go quietly into extinction. The countdown began again. Hours until the Council vault opened. Hours until ancient weapons pointed at Earth. Hours until Captain Jiwan either saved humanity or died trying. She stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the FTL countdown. Behind her, the crew worked with calm efficiency, every person knowing the stakes. They were jumping into the heart of Council territory, to a facility defended by everything the elder species could throw at them. The odds were terrible. The chances of survival were minimal. But they were going anyway, because that's what humans did when faced with extinction. They didn't give up. They didn't surrender. They fought back even when logic said they couldn't win. The FTL drive engaged. The Indomitable vanished from Earth space, racing toward either salvation or oblivion. Admiral Choi watched the ship disappear and whispered a prayer to any god that might be listening. Then he turned back to his displays and continued preparing Earth's defenses. If the Council wanted to destroy humanity, they would have to earn it. The Indomitable dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Obsidian Citadel system. Captain Jiwan immediately saw they weren't alone. Ships from the Coalition materialized around her. Vessels from the Vrenkai, Rebel Thaxis drones, reformed Keldari. They had come to help, to buy humanity time against whatever defenses the Council had prepared. The Citadel itself was ancient beyond measure. A station built by species long dead, repurposed by the Council into a vault for their most dangerous secrets. Defense platforms powered up as the fleet approached, energy weapons charging, missile tubes opening. The battle began immediately. Coalition ships formed a protective screen around the Indomitable, taking fire from the automated defenses, while Jiwan's ship burned toward the station at maximum acceleration. Explosions lit up the darkness as ships died on both sides, but the Coalition held the line. Giving Jiwan the opening she needed, the Indomitable crashed through the Citadel's outer hull using shaped charges. Breaching directly into the station's interior, Jiwan led a boarding team through the wreckage, moving fast before Council forces could organize a response. Dr. Mino and Lieutenant Kong stayed close, along with 20 of Earth's best soldiers. They fought through corridors that hadn't seen combat in millennia. Council security forces, mostly automated drones, and a few Vrelnith guards, tried to stop them. The fighting was brutal and close. Human soldiers used tactics learned in Earth's violent history, moving with aggression and creativity that mechanical defenders couldn't match. Lieutenant Kong's team reached security systems as they advanced, using the same hacking techniques that had infiltrated Council networks weeks before. Doors opened that should have stayed sealed. Defense turrets shut down at critical moments. The path to the vault cleared meter by meter. Finally, they reached it. A massive chamber filled with artifacts from dead civilizations, technology that hummed with barely contained power, weapons that could manipulate gravity, devices that could sterilize entire biospheres, tools that unraveled molecular bonds at the quantum level. Dr. Minho approached the central nexus carefully, his hands shaking. This was it. Either he could communicate with these ancient machines, or they would all die here. And Earth would die soon after. He began the protocols he had reconstructed from stolen council files, speaking in mathematical patterns and quantum probability equations. The weapons responded, their consciousness ancient and vast, existing in dimensions human minds could barely comprehend. Minho did something the council had never tried. He told the truth. He showed the weapons what had happened to their creators, how the council had destroyed them not because they were dangerous, but because they were free. He showed them the pattern of lies and control that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years. He showed them Earth and humanity's fight for the same freedom their creators had died for. The weapons made a choice. Power systems shut down across the chamber. Offensive capabilities went dormant. And then something unexpected happened. The weapons began transferring their knowledge to Minho's portable storage devices. Everything their creators had learned. Every innovation, every discovery, every piece of wisdom that the council had tried to bury. More than that, they transmitted a message. They would testify. When this was over, when the fighting stopped, they would tell the galaxy exactly what the council had done. Not as mute evidence, but as witnesses with voices that couldn't be ignored. Captain Jiwan allowed herself a moment of relief. They had done it. The threat was neutralized. Earth was safe. Then alarms screamed throughout the station. Lieutenant Kang's sensors showed a massive energy spike on the edge of the system. The council hadn't been planning to use the ancient weapons from the Citadel. That was misdirection. The real attack was coming from somewhere else. A fleet of council loyalists, using older Forbidden's weapons they had kept hidden, was jumping toward Earth. They would arrive in less than an hour, and they weren't coming to negotiate. They were coming to burn humanity's homeworld as punishment for defying the old order. Commander Yoon's ghost fleet, damaged from the battle at Kronos Expanse, received emergency orders from Admiral Choi. Get back to Earth, now. Every ship that could still move pushed their FTL drives past safety limits, racing to arrive before the council force. But they would be too late. The attack fleet would reach Earth first. On Earth itself, Admiral Choi stood in a rebuilt command center and watched the enemy approach. Millions of people were in shelters, but billions more had nowhere to go. If this attack succeeded, humanity would be crippled for generations, maybe destroyed entirely. He activated Earth's planetary defense grid. Every weapon platform in orbit armed. Every ship in the home fleet moved to intercept positions. Every defense system humanity had built over 15 years prepared to fire. It wouldn't be enough. The attacking fleet was too large, too powerful. But humans would make them pay for every life they took. The Council fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of Earth's solar system and began their attack run. Ancient weapons charged, ready to rain destruction on the planet below. And something happened that no one expected. Ships began appearing throughout the system. Not the Ghost Fleet, though they were coming. Not coalition vessels, though they were rallying. These were ships from species that had never taken sides, neutral powers that preferred to stay out of galactic conflicts. They came because they had watched humanity reveal the Council's lies. They had watched humans fight impossible odds and win. They had watched one species stand up and say no more to a system that had oppressed everyone for thousands of years. And they decided they couldn't stay neutral anymore. The Faxis Collective, despite declaring neutrality, sent agricultural barges modified with weapons. The Keldari reformists brought their energy manipulation technology. Dozens of minor species, some with only a handful of ships, arrived to stand with Earth. The message was clear. The Council could destroy humanity, but they would have to go through everyone else first. Admiral Choi stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The attacking Council fleet suddenly found itself outnumbered. Not by much, but enough to make their mission impossible. They couldn't fight through to Earth without taking unacceptable casualties. The Council Fleet Commander transmitted a message. This isn't over. The Council will never accept this rebellion. Commander Yoon, her ghost fleet finally arriving, replied, "The Council doesn't have a choice anymore. The galaxy has spoken." The Council fleet withdrew, not defeated in battle, but defeated by something more powerful, the realization that they stood alone. Every species that mattered had chosen the other side. The war ended not with a final battle, but with the Council's power simply dissolving. Leaders who had ruled for centuries found their orders ignored. Species declared independence. The vast bureaucracy that controlled galactic civilization stopped functioning as those who ran it walked away. In the aftermath, Ambassador Lee worked with representatives from across the galaxy to establish the Galactic Commonwealth. It was messy, chaotic, full of arguments and disagreements. But it was built on truth instead of lies, on cooperation instead of control. The Prometheus Accords became the foundation for the new government. Every species had equal voice. Resources were shared openly. Technology development was encouraged, not restricted. The quarantine zones were open to all who needed them. The ancient weapons, true to their word, testified about the Council's crimes. Velmuth and the other leaders who had planned genocide faced trial not in council chambers, but before a tribunal that included representatives from every species, including those the Council had tried to erase. The verdicts were harsh. Some leaders faced exile. Others were sentenced to forced transparency, their every action monitored and recorded for the rest of their lives. The goal wasn't revenge, but accountability, making sure the galaxy never forgot what happened when power went unchecked. Captain Ji-Wan was offered command of the Commonwealth Defense Force. She turned it down. Instead, she accepted a position training officers from dozens of species, teaching them not just human tactics, but the philosophy behind them. Think creatively. Question authority. Never assume the way things are is the way they have to be. Dr. Minho became the Commonwealth's first chief historical advisor. He spent his remaining years documenting the civilizations the Council had destroyed, making sure their stories were remembered and their knowledge preserved. Commander Yoon transformed the Ghost Fleet into the Commonwealth Exploration Service. They went looking for other species the Council had isolated, offering honest first contact based on respect rather than manipulation. Lieutenant Kong led the new intelligence service, but with a crucial difference. Everything his division learned was eventually made public. Secrets were temporary, held only as long as necessary for security, then released. Transparency became the foundation of trust. Admiral Choi retired to Earth, spending his final years writing about the war. His memoir became required reading for diplomats and military officers across the galaxy. Its lesson was simple: trust, but verify. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And never, ever assume that powerful beings have your best interests at heart. Ambassador Lee became the Commonwealth's first Secretary General. It was a harder job than anything she had done before. Every day brought new crises, new conflicts, new challenges. But they were honest challenges, dealt with openly, not hidden behind diplomatic language and secret plans. 5 years after the Council's fall, Earth hosted a commemoration ceremony. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to remember the war and honor those who died in it. Dr. Han's team had built a monument, a simple structure that listed every ship lost, every life sacrificed. Human and alien alike. Captain Ji-Wan attended with a class of her students, young officers from a dozen different species who would never know the galaxy that existed before humanity said no to tyranny. One of them, a human girl whose parents had served on the Ghost Fleet, asked the question that everyone wondered: why did we do it? We could have lived quietly, accepted what the Council wanted. Why risk everything? Ji-Wan looked at the monument, at the names carved in stone, and thought about her answer carefully. When she spoke, her words carried to everyone gathered there. Because someone had to. Because living under lies isn't really living. Because our children deserved better than we had, and the only way to give it to them was to fight for it. The council thought we would accept oppression because resistance was hard. They thought we would choose safety over freedom. They were wrong. She smiled at the young officer. Humanity learned something a long time ago, back on Earth before we ever reached the stars. Freedom isn't given. It's taken. It's earned through sacrifice and courage, and the willingness to stand up even when the odds are impossible. We took it not just for ourselves, but for everyone who would come after. For you and your generation. That's not special. That's just being human. The girl nodded, understanding something important. The galaxy they lived in, imperfect as it was, existed because people were willing to fight for it. And if it ever needed defending again, they would be ready. The ceremony ended as the sun set over Earth, painting the sky in colors that seemed to promise hope. Ships from 100 species orbited in peaceful formation, representatives of a galaxy learning to trust each other. It wasn't perfect. Old prejudices still existed. Conflicts still arose. Some species struggled with the rapid changes. But the fundamental difference was that now, these problems were addressed honestly. No more lies. No more hidden plans. No more accepting oppression as the price of stability. The Galactic Council had lied, and Earth had responded immediately. That response changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly what humanity had intended.